Hello Year 11, it's Mr. Raj here. I'm going to talk about some revision tips for GCSE as your exam approaches very soon. So we're going to look at what we first of all do when we are sitting in the exam hall. When we are sitting in the exam hall, we need to first of all be calm. Just read the instructions of the paper, making sure you got a black pen, which has got plenty of ink in it, and you're calm and ready to start the exam. Then what we're going to do is look through the paper. As they say, you can open your paper, look through the paper and try and target the easy questions, circle them and say, I'm going to target those first. Then leading up to your revision, I would say, know your formulae that's expected of you for the foundation and then the higher tier. Practice knowing how to apply them. Now, you will be given a formulae sheet in the exam, so try to remember as much as possible, and more importantly, how to apply these formulae to exam questions. So, pressure, speed, and density are well-known compound measures formulae that you should be aware of. They typically come up as worded problems, so you should be familiar with these exam questions. The most important thing is read the exam question twice. If you don't understand it, read it again until you fully understand what's required of you when you're answering the question, and you need to be calm when you're reading it. Diagrams, always draw diagrams in pencils and graphs as well, making sure your diagrams are clear for the examiner to mark. Always show working out for every question. Even if you make a silly mistake, you can still gain 4 out of 5 marks. If it was a 5-mark question, please do not just write down the answer. Show full working out for each question and make that a good habit, as you will get method marks for attempting questions, and if not, getting full marks for a question. So it's been estimated that students can improve their marks up to 10%. So we've got to be consistent with the way we revise. Now, consistency is very, very important as you approach your exam. So what I'm going to do in the remaining parts of this revision video for you is to go over some crossover topics between the foundation and the higher tier. Generally speaking, the latter part of the foundation tier is the beginning part of the higher tier. Some of the questions, there's some overlap there. So I'm just going to target some of those questions from the predicted paper from the First Class Maths website of the 2024 predicted paper. It is a predicted paper. It's not guaranteed to come up. It's just to give us an idea of what kind of topics we should be solid on. We should be solid on all the topics, but just to give us an overview of this is what a paper may look like. It doesn't mean it's guaranteed, it's just an overview. So let's take some topics. So I've started from question 24 and I'm going to work all the way till the end. And also I'm going to finish off with some exact trig value questions. And just to remind you what the trig values are. Now, let's take this question here. It's from the non-calculator paper, and it's the predicted foundation paper, question 24. So we have 3.5, and we want to add 1 2/3. So the first thing we ought to do is to convert this to an improper fraction. So we're going to do 3 times the denominator, so 3 times 2, that gives me 6, and then I'm going to do 6 plus 1, which is the numerator, which gives me 7. So I can rewrite this as 7 over 2. Now do the same thing here. 1 times 3 gives me 3, and then I'm going to do 3 plus 2, which is 5. So now I can write that here. So I'm going to get 5 over 3. So now the first step is we need to make the denominators the same. So we're going to times this by 3, times that by 3, times this one by 2, times this one by 2. And that will give me the following. It will give me 21 over 6 plus 10 over 6, which will give me 31 over 6. Now the question, it says to leave it as a mixed number. So we say how many 6 is going to 31? Well, I get 5. I get 1 remainder, so it'll be 1 over 6. So it'll be 5 and 1 over 6 is the answer for 3 marks. So now the next question, we need to simplify this index law problem, or indices. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to write them separately. So the first step is to do the numbers. 20 divided by 4 gives me 5. Then I've got p to the power of 8 divided by p to the power of 2. Now when you divide powers, you minus the powers. So that will give me p to the power of 6. And then now, I've got to be careful here, it's q to the power of 5 divided by q to the power of minus 1. In other words, q to the power of 5 minus 1. Two minuses next to each other become a plus. So I get q to the power of 6. So therefore, my final answer will be equal to 5, then p to the power of 6, and then q to the power of 6 as well as my final solution. Part B says, write 8 times 2 to the power of 10 as a power of 2. So what we're going to do there is to do the following. We are going to write 8 as a power of 2, which is 2 cubed. And we could write it as 2 cubed times 2 to the power of 10. Now, these numbers on the bottom here are the same, 2. We call this the base. Now, the bases must be the same for index laws. So now we have 2, which is the same. When you times indices, we add the powers. So we do 3 plus 10, which is 13. So we get 2 to the power of 13 as our answer. Now, the next question is a very important question for both higher and the foundation. It's estimate or estimation. So when you estimate, the key thing here is every number must be rounded to one significant figure. So therefore, we round 0.413 to one significant figure. That's going to be 0.4. Then we're going to round 0.309 to one significant figure. That's going to be 0.3. And here is the important part. Here we're going to get 0.005. So 0.4 times 0.3 divided by 0.005. Now here is the key thing. We don't have a calculator. So what's an efficient way to do this without a calculator? Well, I would say if I take the numerator, I'm going to do 4 out of 10 times 3 out of 10 on the side. It's a fraction. 4 out of 10 times 3 out of 10, because that's what it is 12 over 100. Well, 12 over 100 as a decimal is 0.12. So I could write that as 0.12 all divided by 0.005. And now what we're going to do is to make the denominator a whole number. Well, to make it a whole number, the decimal point needs to move to 1, 2, and 3 spaces to the right. So I need to multiply it by 1,000 and multiply the numerator also by 1,000. So that's going to give me 120 divided by 5 is my fraction. So I can do this without a calculator and say how many 5 is going to 12. Well, that's going to be 2. Remainder of 2 here. So that gives me the following. So I get 4. So I'm just going to write that in red so it's clear. You can see what the remainder is. So I get a 2. To prove the clarity of my handwriting there. So we get 20 and that would give me a 4. So we don't need to do anything else. You just leave it like that. Don't do anything else after that. So the answer is 24 and that's it. Question involves standard form. So what is standard form? Standard form involves the following, that every number must be written like this: a times 10 to the power of n, where importantly a is a number between 1 and less than 10. Now that's important. What does that mean? It means that you can have values like 9.999, 9.998, doesn't matter, as long as the value is greater than 1 or 1 as a minimum, but strictly less than 10. So what does that mean? It means that if I was to write 0.00037 like so, the number between 1 and 10 would be 3.7. Now I write a times 10 here and I say, well, if the number was written as 3.7, how do I get to its original place? Well, I go to the left 1 space, 2 spaces, 3 spaces, and 4 spaces, and that would be 3.7 times 10 to the power of minus 4. Then it says to write 6.18 times 10 to the power of 6 as an ordinary number. So what I'm going to do is to say, well, if I write 6.18, and if I was to move it 2 spaces, I'll get 618. So I'm going to add some zeros here. It doesn't matter how many zeros I put. I can write as many as I like. It doesn't make a difference. And I'm going to say, well, that's 6.8. And what I'm going to do is then move my decimal point towards the right by 6 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. So that's going to be my number. So I'm going to get 618. And how many zeros? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 zeros. So that's what I get there. The next question states the following. Express 68,450 as a product of its prime factors. Well, they've given us a clue here that 6,845 is 5 times 37 squared. Now, the only difference here really is that this has been multiplied by 10. We've got an extra 0 there. So if I say 6845 times 10 is exactly equal to 685 or 450, as so, then, or 68,450, then what we can do here is to say, well, let's copy what we have above. 5 times 37 squared. Now, I'm going to write it as a times 10 first, but we want it as a product of primes, so that's going to be 5 times 37. Well, 37 squared is 37 again, and that's going to be 2 times 5. So one way of writing the answer is to do 2 times 5 times 5 times 37 times 37. That's one way of writing the answer. The other way of writing the answer is as powers. So you'd write it as 2 times, now 5 times 5 is 5 squared, and then we have 37, and we've got 2 of them, so it's squared. So they're both equivalent. It doesn't make a difference how you write your answer. So the next question is a question involving the median and the mean. So what we're going to do here is, the first question states to find the class interval that contains the median. So what I'm going to do here is to add a column here called the cumulative frequency. Cumulative just means to add. So we're going to start with 6. 6 plus 6 is 12. 12 plus 10 is 22. And 22 plus 3 is 25. So what we're going to do to find the median class interval, we're going to do 25 plus 1 divided by 2, which will be half of 26, which is the 13th data value. But the question is, where is that 13th data value? Where does that lie? Well, this contains values 0 to 6 here. This contains values 7 to 12. This contains values 13 to 22. And this contains values from 23 to 25. So I'm looking for the 13th data value. Well, we can see the 13th data value lies in this group. So I'm going to draw an arrow here. So that is my median class interval. So that's going to be, we're going to write it exactly how they've written it. So it's m is greater than or equal to 20, but strictly less than 30 is the median class interval. So that's what you would do for part A. Now for part B, it says to work out an estimate for the mean amount of time spent on homework by the students. So we're going to just erase all this stuff here. And we're going to add a new column called the midpoints. And that's very important when we've got group data. So we're going to add a column called MP for midpoint. And how do you find that? We do 0 plus 10 divided by 2. That's exactly in the middle, which is 5. So I get 5. I do the same thing here. 10 plus 20 divided by 2. That gives me 15. So I get 15. I can find the middle in between 20 and 30 is 25. And again, the same process. 30 plus 40 divided by 2 will give me 35. Now, the frequency is called F. Now, here we're going to have F times MP. So we take the frequency and multiply it by the midpoint. So 6 times 5 gives me 30. Then 6 times 15. So we're going to do 15 times 6 here. That gives me 30. 1 times 6 is 6 plus 3 gives me 90. So I get 90 there. Don't forget, this is a non-calculator paper. 10 times 25 is 250. So I can write 250 here. And then 3 times 35, I can do that here. That's going to give me 105. So I get 3 times 35 gives me 105. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to now add all of these values together. So I'm going to do 90 plus 30 is 120. So it's 120 plus 250 plus 105. Add these together. That gives me a 5. That gives me a 7. And that gives me 4. So 475. So 475 there gives me the total. Now the total of the frequency is 25. And they've already told me that in the question anyway. So to work out the mean, we're going to do 475 divided by 25. So it's going to be 475 divided by 25. Well, what I'm going to do is to divide the top by 5 and divide the bottom by 5, or the numerator by 5 and the denominator by 5. So on the denominator, I'm going to get 5. Then I'm going to do 5 divided by 475. Then that will give me a 9, 2 remainder, and I will get a 5 there. So I get 95. So I'll get 95 and then do 5 divided by 95. So we get a 1, 4 remainder there, and I get a 9. So I get 19 as an estimate for the mean. Another crossover topic is expanding brackets. So let's do it. 9 times x gives me 9x. 9 times 3 gives me 27. 4 times x gives me 4x. 4 times 1 gives me 4. So in our case, we get minus 4x minus 4. So 9x minus 4x is 5x. And 27 minus 4 is 23. So that's been expanded and simplified. So now what we're going to do is to factorize this. That will give me the following. So what I'm going to do is explain the rules for this. Is whenever we have a minus at the end, we have different signs in both brackets. In both brackets. So it means one's a plus, one's a minus. And this plus here goes on the larger value. So larger value here. And we're going to take 14 and then do 7 times 2 is 14. But the plus must go on the larger value. So it's a plus 7 here and a minus 2 there. 7 take away 2 is positive 5. So our brackets are going to be as follows. X plus 7 and x minus 2 is our solution. Now the next question is an exact trig value question. So what we're going to do here is it says write down the exact value of cos 0. Well, you should know that cos 0 is going to be 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the following here. I'm going to draw a little table for you that you would have to memorize for your exact trig values. So we've got sine, cos, and tan. And we need to know the following values: 0, 30 degrees, 45 degrees, and 60 degrees. I'm also going to include 90 degrees just for completion. And then I'm going to draw a little table here to separate these values as so. Now these values you would have to memorize to be faster in the exam. So here, what we're going to do, I'm going to draw my grid lines in, and I'll use a different color for each function. So the first one you need to know is for sine. So sine of 0 will always be 0. Sine of 30 is a half. Sine of 45 is root 2 over 2. Sine of 60 is root 3 over 2. Sine of 90 is always 1. Then the next value we're going to do is cosine. So cos of 0 would be 1. So the next value will be cos 30, which is root 3 over 2. So I'm going to improve the clarity of my handwriting there. So the next value is cos 30, which is root 3 over 2. Cos 45 is root 2 over 2. Cos 60 is a half. Cos 90 is 0. And tan of 0 is 0. Tan 30 is root 3 over 3. Tan 45 is 1. Tan 60 is root 3. And tan 90 is something called infinity. Okay, Year 11, that concludes our revision video. Please feel free to go and see your maths teachers, and I wish you the very best of luck for your GCSE examinations, which will be coming very soon, and wish you all the best, and I hope you get the best grades possible. Thank you very much.